Reconnection with Phil Goff again this morning.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Phil Goff.
All right, let's try again once with Phil Goff today. Hello to you, Phil.
G'day, Wammo. The government's really got to do something about this infrastructure in Auckland, doesn't it? Phone keeps cutting out, and it's not even a telecom phone.
It's regulation. We need regulation of the telcos, Phil. That's what we need.
we need a better performance from them, I know that much.
Okay, now we're talking about polls. I don't want to dwell on polls too much, but it just does seem like a surprise that National is still riding high in the polls. There still seems to be this afterglow from the election, even after some very unpopular policies coming through.
Yeah, I think if you look at the Roy Morgan poll that came out last week, that showed quite a turnaround in the right track, wrong track, and it had national polling below 50% for the first time, I think. But, polls will go up and down. But just judging from the mood out there, I'm certainly picking up that people are less willing to take, explanations for granted and to give the government benefit of the doubt. I think that's an indicator that it will move against the government, but it's certainly taken its time.
Let's get on to some bigger picture sort of stuff now, Phil, if you don't mind. Because there's a lot of issues out there. There's a lot of issues, but some of them can be completely overshadowed by major world events, like recently, of course, with the Iceland volcano and grounding all those flights in Europe. It seems to make some other stuff seem rather important when all that kind of stuff is going on. Rather unimportant, I should say.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of human interest in that too, Wammo. With you just put yourself in the position of a Kiwi sitting in Hong Kong, sitting in Los Angeles, waiting for a flight and not knowing whether it's going to be 2 days or 5 days or whether they're going to get there at all. So that naturally makes the media. But
also, of course, when the whole flights are grounded like that, commerce stops moving around. People can't do business. I mean, this is big issue stuff, really. I mean, if it was to go on for a long, long time, who knows what can happen or how things could work out.
It certainly has an economic impact.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they were talking about the airlines losing a couple of $100 million a day. And that's with a lot of the airlines in a pretty fragile situation anyway. And, who's to say that this volcano is not going to, keep erupting for a week or a month? And that would have a serious implication in terms of basically tourism, but also air-freighted trade and broader economic implications for the world recovery.
Basically stuff that we take for granted, Phil, isn't it? Really, stuff that we take it for granted that we can just hop on a plane and go wherever we want.
Yeah, and we don't take into account the fact that you have these acts of God that can totally disrupt things in that way. I'm a bit alarmed when I hear some of the airlines saying, we want to start flying again, because I remember what happened over Jakarta and I remember what happened over Anchorage when planes flying through volcanic ash lost their engine power.
Yep.
It's not the sort of thing that you'd want to risk people's lives on, frankly.
Amazing stories, those stories. So what about if there was something on that scale, maybe even larger, that we could see in the future, but we're doing nothing about now? It just seems amazing to me. I'm thinking about the world oil crisis. I don't know do you know about this, Phil? Do you know that it's coming?
Well, we know that there's the concept of peak oil at the point where the consumption of oil is going to start exceeding the production of it. I'm a firm believer and an optimist, I guess, in the sense that we will find the technology to deal with that. Are we going to find it by 2015? I'm just reading a report here by the US military. They've warned oil output may dip, causing massive shortages by 2015. Shortfall could reach 10 million barrels a day. The cost of crude oil is predicted to top $100 a barrel. Yeah, the irony of that is that when that starts to become a reality, it does force people to act. And while we might not deal with global warming because, simply because we know global warming is happening, we may deal with the causes of it when we have to because of the economics involved with the cost of oil. And, I can foresee a situation in New Zealand where, our rail lines are electrified, a third of our car fleet will be electric cars, we'll be generating our electricity largely sustainably, not simply through hydro, but also through wind turbines. There are the answers to that. There are the alternatives. But because we've got so much vested interest in the motor vehicle industry and the oil industry, we simply haven't gone out to find those answers, but we may be forced to.
But also we're too fascinated by the now, living in the moment, as opposed to thinking about the future.
Yeah, that's a human weakness. We all say, oh, look, we can't see the problem of global warming yet. Look, the water is not lapping over the walls, even though the scientists tell us that it's going to be in, 10, 15, 20 years' time. And we've got to take an evidence-based approach. We've got to look at what the forecasts are in terms of energy availability and global warming. That's why we were so keen to try to get the emissions trading scheme up. But people will look at it and say, oh, somebody sent an email saying, well, we've sexed up the figures a little bit, therefore it's not really happening. Overwhelmingly, the evidence is that it is happening. We've got to do something about it. And the earlier you act, the better the chance you've got of dealing with the problem without a whole lot of economic pain and suffering.
And so by the same token, the evidence is that this oil crisis is looming. It is going to be happening. They're saying in 2012, surplus oil production capacity would entirely disappear. Why are we not preparing for this? Why is not the Labour government putting the pressure on the government to actually start doing something about this? Or is it just not popular?
Well, no, I think in all of the things that we did, starting off the home insulation program, which went back into, 3 or 4 years ago, which the government's now, first of all abolished and decided to take up, that was part of conserving energy, using biofuels, and applaud the efforts of Air New Zealand and working on biofuels. I went down, even the V8s, I went down to the V8 race in Hamilton, and they were running on 85% bioethanol. So there are those alternatives. What we need to do is bring forward the time when we start to adopt them. Electrifying the railways, another thing that I mentioned before, that was something that we had in place. Joyce stepped back from, but has finally come back to acknowledging, well, that's got to happen. All of those things are important in terms of sustainability and a potential energy crisis for the future.
What about our exports? How are we going to get our products overseas?
Well, again, you've got to look at the technology that's improving the efficiency. If you look at shipping today, the efficiency of the use of oil consumption there is many times greater than it was a decade, let alone a generation ago.
But surely shipping companies are going to look at New Zealand and where we are on the globe and say, look at the price of oil. There's no way we're going to head down there anymore. It's such a small market.
I don't think it's that bad. When we did stuff on food miles, when the Europeans were saying, oh, it's very environmentally unfriendly to buy things from New Zealand, what we found out actually, per kilogram of butter, for example, you consume more energy in the United Kingdom driving to the supermarket to buy it than was the cost of shipping that 1 kilo of butter across from one side of the world to the other. So the energy efficiencies you're looking for are not necessarily your long-distance freight, but actually the short-term use of the SUV to go down to the supermarket to buy the products there. So I don't think that situation is as dire as some people with a vested interest in Europe would say it is. But we've got to take it seriously, and we've got to keep looking for technological answers as well as doing things better. I think we started going down that route, and I hope that the government, notwithstanding what it's done on emissions trading schemes, will come to grips with the reality of what's happening in the world.
But what's it going to take to put this at the top of the agenda? Because, this will overshadow anything like GST or welfare payments or anything.
Yeah, well, what it takes, I think, is the immediacy of the problem and the way that the science stacks up. I'm not familiar with the report that you've just had a look at there, but I know those risks are out there, and we don't know quite what the scale of it is, whether they'll find new reserves or whatever. But you've got to look at worst case scenarios, and you've got to look at the whole question of sustainability, which is why we should be looking at replacing the use of fossil fuels anyway.
Phil Goff, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Wammo. Catch up with you next week, mate. Cheers.
Just gone 9 o'clock. Stand by. Very shortly we'll have the latest from the Radio Live News Centre.
Kiwi FM.